Good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us for this sixth in a series of webinars from the Centre for the Advancement of Positive Behaviour Support at Bild. The aim of the webinar series is to support the development of PBS practice, and we're grateful to the Department of Health, NHS England and Skills for Care for their support. Today's webinar is Staff Behaviours Valued by Service Users, the Views of People Whose Behaviour Challenges. And our presenter is Tom Evans. Tom is a regional lead for Bild's Centre for the Advancement of Positive Behaviour Support and Behaviour Support Manager at Southdown Housing. As PBS lead for a not-for-profit service provider, Tom is responsible for the development of PBS strategy, leadership and internal quality assurance of PBS, and management of the central PBS team. I'd just like to quickly remind you that there will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, so do send in your questions using the entry box at the bottom of your screen. The presentation slides will be available to download on the Bild website at bild.org.uk/CAPBS webinars, an address that will appear on the screen at the end of the webinar. I'd now like to hand you over to Tom.
Hi, so I'm going to be talking today about a study that I completed in Southdown, which is the organisation I work for. Southdown is a service provider organisation in the south of England. We wanted to help our staff to understand the perspective of people with learning disabilities, of their behaviour, of staff behaviour. We wanted to help them understand that their behaviour might have an impact on the people they were supporting. So to do that, I wanted to find out what those people we were supporting actually felt about how staff behaved towards them. We talked as well about attitudes that staff might display towards them and how those might make them feel. So really this was driven in the first place by thinking about the relationship between the people we support and the people supporting them, and the relationship and rapport quality. So there's been work done on this in the past. Mansell talked about behaviour as a product of interaction between individual and environmental factors, and obviously staff behaviour is a massively important environmental factor. So McGill had talked about the importance of social relationships and the quality of those relationships. Emerson, McVilly talking about the quality of relationships influencing well-being, influencing quality of life. And so we wanted to look at what might contribute to that and the quality of those relationships. In terms of rapport, there's a couple of definitions that we referred to. So Oxford English Dictionary, Cambridge English Dictionary, between them you could summarise the definition as rapport being good understanding of somebody and an ability to communicate with them, and also a close and harmonious relationship. So I wanted to look at what might aid rapport, what might help rapport, what might help that good harmonious relationship. Majito, McLaughlin and Carr had done an important study, I think, which referred specifically to rapport as a setting event, and how that would influence behaviours that followed. So again, wanting to think about that. So that's where we started from. So there's this bi-directional relationship between staff and client behaviour. So we were very aware that staff can influence behaviour. They're reinforcing adaptive behaviour, but they're also reinforcing behaviours of concern. So controlling staff behaviour seemed to be an important thing to consider. A lot of work's been done around attribution of behaviour and what staff think and feel about behaviours of the people they're supporting and how that influences their behaviour and how effective they are in providing support for people whose behaviour is concerning. So by trying to understand what people with learning disabilities thought about staff behaviour and then helping staff to understand that, we thought that might have potentially could have a positive impact on staff attribution if they were able to hear things from the perspective of the people they were supporting themselves, and specifically to hear from people with learning disabilities. Well, actually, sometimes it's what you're doing that's part of the problem. We thought that would be quite important to recognise. So, equally, lots of work previously done. The impact of client behaviour. The references for all these papers are available on the Bild website, so I'm not going to go into those in too much detail now. But lots of work just demonstrating the idea that staff behaviour is a variable. So we need to consider it and what we can do to help staff behave sometimes differently. So when we're thinking about improved rapport, improved relationship, that's going to have an impact on somebody's support. That's going to have an impact as part of a multi-element plan. And we also understood that if you had a good relationship with somebody and you were in good rapport, then you're probably much more able to be able to teach people skills, help them learn different ways of behaving. So this relationship just seemed to be critical. So we wanted to talk to people with learning disabilities themselves because it's the right thing to do. I'd been involved in a larger study where we'd spoken to professionals, a whole range of different professionals, around what they thought the qualities of good support work were. But I was particularly interested in what the people with learning disabilities themselves actually said. So apart from it being the right thing to do, it was also sensible thing to do in terms of the study. So they are scarce studies of people's own perspective. I mean, there are some, notably. There are, again, in the references, there are some, but not many. So we wanted to look at what people with learning disability, behaviours of concern, what they actually said. It's worth saying as well, we wanted to talk to people who certainly either currently or in the past had considerable behaviours of concern. And we wanted to see if they were able to say what made a difference in that in terms of staff behaviour, to what extent that affected their behaviour. So I carried out semi-structured interviews, 17 people. I'll go through the details of those people now. So 10 men, 7 women, average age 40. Because of the need for people to be able to consent to be part of the research, and because of other resource implications, and we took a pragmatic decision that actually we interview people with mild to moderate learning disabilities. So obviously very, very aware that a limitation of this is that people who don't use speech and people with a more severe profound learning disability weren't part of the participant group. And obviously a bigger future study including their point of view would be really, really important. But for this study we took that pragmatic decision. 17 people also had autism. And as I say, they all the participants could communicate verbally to some degree. I mean, it did vary. Some people had very, very limited speech. So one participant with autism took a very, very long time to answer a very simple question, which is fine, and then gave single word answers. So there was a real range of verbal ability, with some people able to answer sentences, some people absolutely not. But yeah, they could all communicate verbally to some degree. I've talked about behaviours of concern, and at least half of them serious behaviours of concern. In terms of the support they were getting, ranged right up to 103 hours per week, one-to-one for some of the people whose behaviour was most concerning, down to, there was one participant who only received 23 hours a week. He was fairly independent at that point. And I think the most important point about the participants were was that they had significant experience of a range of services and staff supports. They were talking from considerable experience. It's also really important to say that when they were talking about what was good and what was less good staff support, they were referring to that significant experience. So they weren't saying, you know, my support at the moment is great or not. They were talking about their whole life experience, particularly participants with autism were able to recall specific behaviours going back quite a long time. So they were able to share that significant experience. Some of the participants were able to compare their current service and the support they were getting to less good services in the past. Others were able to compare the current residential service with the current day setting, for example. And they were able to make those distinctions and say this is good and this is not good. And obviously people have capacity to consent, which was important. So in terms of thinking about the actual process, some of the things I was asking was, tell me about support you've had in the past that wasn't that great. So I needed to be really, really careful that I wasn't asking questions that would in any way, the risk of bringing up a difficult, even a traumatic history or memory of such a situation was an important thing to consider. So the interviews were face-to-face. I took quite some time getting to know, I knew some of the participants already, getting to know the others, making sure that we had a good rapport in the first place, so that I was in a fairly good position to be able to judge this is becoming uncomfortable for the person. So making clear that people could take a break at any point, that we could terminate the interview completely, or we could stop and come back another time, or whatever. That was all part of the pre-interview process in terms of people understanding what they were actually consenting to. But I guess the point being that interviewing people face to face, I was able to judge, no, actually I need to step back from this line of interview question at this point in time because this person seems to be becoming uncomfortable, and that was important. So information around the interview and how it was going to be carried out was given accessibly beforehand. People were given plenty of time to digest that information and consider whether they wanted to be part of it or not. Actually, of all the people I approached, they all decided they wanted to be part of the study, which is marvellous. One participant didn't want to be recorded. She wanted just to talk, so I furiously made notes, but most other people were happy to be recorded on a recording device. We made sure that people chose where they were being interviewed and what time, so their routine wasn't at all disrupted, and obviously whatever setting they wanted. That was all fine. And we made sure people were able to take a break, end it whenever they wanted. And as I've said, rapport was quite important. In terms of immediate feedback, in a couple of the interviews, the participants actually spoke about the current support they were receiving and expressed some dissatisfaction. So I was able to, once the interview had finished, and obviously with their agreement, we were able to feed back some of those concerns directly to the manager of that service. There was one instance where there was practice. The participant was describing something that he wasn't happy about a specific staff member, and we were able to feed that back to the service manager straight away, and that was taken forward and I think resolved well. So I felt that was important, that if current situations came up, that they were dealt with immediately. They weren't just, that wasn't just part of the research. It was about making sure people's current service was all it should be as well. So semi-structured interviews, open questions, wanted people to express what they thought as much as they were able or willing to. And as I say, some people were talked a lot and gave a lot of details and were very happy to talk a lot about their experiences, both good and bad. Other people much more reticent. Interestingly, some of the older participants seemed less able to be critical of staff behaviour, which was interesting, and I discussed that in the paper. But yeah, it varied. Adapted the language, obviously, that I was using. Different interviewees needed different things. These were the sorts of questions. So, what did staff do? What was good? What was not good? What were staff like? What should staff do? What should they not do? How should they be? Those are the sorts of ways I phrased the similar questions. Basically, trying to get to the bottom of what behaviours were valued, what attitudes were valued or not. And I guess it's important as well to say that we were able to work out what people liked and didn't like based on what they said, but also based on what they said they didn't like. So they might say, this is good and this wasn't good, that explicitly, but other people referred to what they thought was good support by saying they shouldn't do this. So I think that's important to bear in mind as well. So then did a thematic analysis, immersed in the data, lots of reading, rereading of the transcripts, analysed the entire transcripts, coded, analysed the codes, identified the themes, condensed the themes down and down, reviewing and refining. So we ended up with 5 themes and gave them names, and the names of the themes were direct text, direct quotes from the participants. Yes. So these are the themes. There were 5. The first one, you would think, well, yeah, that's pretty obvious. You would expect that. A nice person, a kind person. I'll go into that in a bit more detail. Sub-themes there being how staff speak and friendliness. Second theme was help me. People talked about practical help, but also emotional help, emotional support, feeling safe. And also some people spoke specifically around help when they're angry or upset, and what was useful and what was not useful. Not controlling of my life. This is some of the most emotional, I think, text, certainly, from participants. And there's sub-themes here being told what to do, being told off, and service-based arrangements, rules. The other themes being know me well and make time. So these are the themes in a bit more detail. So the first one, a nice person, a kind person. Everyone was represented in this theme. Staff should treat people in a good way. They should be kind, they should be nice, they should have a sense of humour, they should be caring, they should be generous, they should be honest, talkative, patient. Everybody referred to this. Friendly, respectful, speaking in a calm, polite way, and they shouldn't take out the mickey out of people was a phrase that one participant used. They shouldn't be unkind. I've included in this presentation and in the paper itself quite a lot of quotes, because I think that makes, to me, that's the richness. These are direct quotes, obviously, and I'll say a bit more about how we use some of these quotes in terms of staff development and learning later. I'm going to try and read these out, but sometimes when I try and read these quotes out, my voice, it becomes a little difficult, so I will do my best. Nice bunch of staff, helpful, kind, easy to have quiet time. And if we wanted to make noise, that was fine. Didn't mind at all. Very, very helpful, kind. In terms of how staff speak, this is a conversation. So I said, how should they talk to you? Calmly. Debbie, let's do the washing up and that. Yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. That's the way I like it. That way, just calm. What do they do that upsets you? It's the way they speak to people I don't like. Ow. This is it. And she adopted a really loud, unpleasant voice at this point. So Debbie, like that. Aggressive. I don't like loud aggressive. I like calmly. When that particular section was fed back to the staff team who supported that woman, they were significantly moved when they heard that description. Some more quotes here. The good staff talk to me in a polite way. The bad staff don't talk to me in a polite manner, some of them. They give me kind of like attitude in that. And then I kind of kick off. Then I kick off. I just kick off. And then it's a bit unfair, really, because they started it. So he's referring here to, you know, behaviours we might describe as behaviours of concern. He used the phrase kick off, but and he's very able to make the link that the immediate trigger of that was staff's impoliteness. They can be quite rude there. Sometimes they do swear quite a lot down there. If they be rude, just walk away. Don't say anything. This chap was talking about a day centre he attended, and he was making a specific comparison between the service he lived in and the day centre, and yeah. Okay, another sub-theme was friendliness. Kind, don't be unkind. This chap, the man with autism, he used the word selfish a lot, but when we analysed what he was actually saying, he was using selfish to mean friendly, or unfriendly rather. Yeah, that one's a bit difficult to read, to be honest, but you can read it. Okay, so second theme, help me. A lot of people spoke about the help that they needed, which is really interesting. People didn't actually talk about, so a small number talked about wanting to be more independent of staff help, but a lot of people talked about needing significant levels of staff help to be as independent as they were able, which is interesting. Most of the participants in this theme, people very different in the areas that they wanted help with, or wanted some sort of help. And some people referred to looking after me in this as meaning help me, needing to be looked after. So this participant, look after me upstairs. I can't look after myself upstairs on my own. I'm a bit, look after me, look after my life, look after my weekends, stuff like that. Help me out, help me do it. And again, emotional support, not just practical help, so family problems. So practical help, this guy talking about worry about being burnt on pie tins. He likes eating pies in tins and finding it difficult to get them out of the oven. And again, something less positive here. He just wants me to do things all the time because I needed help, and not a lot more, but I just needed a bit of help. Again, he was describing somebody encouraging him to be more independent than he's actually able to be, and what he was describing here was, well, actually just need you to help me with this. In terms of emotional support, feeling safe, again, a conversation, what's it most important for them to do, I said, and the participant said, do Pippa's book check. She referred to herself in the first person. Do Pippa's book check, not every night. They don't do it every night. What else? Say good night, sleep well, sweet dreams every night. What does Pippa do if they don't? She gets upset. There's a crossover here as well with things that make people feel safe and things that matter to people, which is another theme later on. Specifically when people are angry or upset, participants were quite clear what they needed. Calm me down when I'm angry, look after me, make me a cup of tea, that sort of thing. How do they calm you down? Just let me come back to my flat, don't go on, because I don't want to hit out. I don't want to hit out at people. And again, participants being really clear that this behaviour that gets described as, you know, behaviour of concern, this person here really not wanting to do this, but also being quite clear that if things that didn't happen the way they needed to, then that might be a possibility. Third theme, as I said earlier, some of the most emotionally difficult, I think, text certainly for me. Not all the participants, there's actually a lower number, only 10, but this is an area where some of the participants, I got the sense, didn't really, some people weren't able to be critical about staff support in this area, but still 10 participants is quite high. As I've said, some of the most emotive material. The participants definitely valued advice being given. That wasn't a problem. It wasn't don't give me advice, it was don't control me. Included in this was comments about staff rushing people, being bossy, nagging, telling people off. And this is where some of the feelings that this sort of behaviour evoked in participants became clear. So feeling controlled, and that some of these arrangements, restrictions, rules, whatever services might decide to call them, they definitely provoked sadness in some people, and annoyance in other people, and anger in other people. And some people seemed sadly resigned to the fact that that was the way things were in service land, or in their service land, and other people were absolutely not standing for that. And one woman said, "I'm not going to give up without a fight." And yeah. So there you go. Some people also, although they were resigned to it, some other participants spoke about the long-term effects of being treated in these ways. One man particularly talking about, you never quite get over that. It stays with you. So this is an example of advice giving, which was valued. We're good at giving advice, what to do, what not to do. Advice, not telling. And here's some less good example. It's like if I say one thing and they say the other, I just feel like they're telling me. It's hard to explain. It's like if I want to eat something that's not good and things that aren't proper meals and that, I feel it isn't really down to them to tell me this. They don't have no right, do they? Controlling over my life and that. I don't really need. I really don't. So, first sub-theme, being told what to do, drives me up the wall. It's like if I say one thing, then they say the other. Oh, you're not allowed to do this to me. I don't like staff telling me what to do, but I'm not giving up without a fight. She's really, really sad that this woman talking about, her experience at home in everyday life as being a fight. This man here, I don't like it when they're bossy. Eat your lunch outside. They're bossy. I felt they were very bossy. Try and make me do everything I don't want to do, nag at me a lot. Now that last one, again, when that was fed back to the service who supported this participant, again, they were mortified. They genuinely thought they were giving advice, and when they heard that from the client's perspective they were nagging, that had quite a profound effect on the team, and they really rethought how they provide some of that advice. Being told off, really difficult to listen to. Some of these, you can read this one, I think. Yeah, this is the guy who's talking about not ever getting used to it when they've been told off. In terms of service arrangements and rules, this guy, this participant was one of the most verbally able, shall we say. He wanted to be more independent, as he's saying here, and felt that some of the service arrangements and rules were restricting him on doing that. He was talking at times of saying, well, I don't need support today, I want to go off and do this on my own, and said he got in trouble by cancelling his one-to-one support or cancelling because that was on the rota, it needed to happen, and he was saying, well, I don't want it to happen. And he was feeling that those service arrangements were actually holding him back. He talked as well about risk assessments. He was aware of risk assessments, and that the phrase risk assessment was used as a way of almost explaining to him why something couldn't happen. And he had some knowledge around that, but not sufficient to understand it, perhaps in the way that the staff intended it. Fourth theme was about know me well. This was around understanding all the marvellous quirks that we all have, all our idiosyncrasies. The people the participants with autism were particularly spoke a lot on this area. So it's the details of what mattered, and the fact that staff should take these things seriously. So get to know me and what matters to me, and then remember it and take account of it when you're supporting me. So and if staff didn't do that, or if they forgot to do this, then it could trigger any of these feelings in in the client. So some of them made them uncertain or anxious or irritated, others cross, angry. Another thing, I hate being touched, and she touched me, and I went off on one big style. I kicked off, slammed doors, kicked the doors. I like people to understand what I'm saying and things. If they don't understand what I'm saying, I get frustrated and angry. I feel like I want them to understand what I'm saying. Like I start hitting myself, and I shouldn't do that. Another participant, I got routines inside my head. So in the morning, get up, have a cigarette, cup of tea, do whatever I have to do. Same every morning. They need to know that. They should know that when I get stressed and angry, they don't come in here. This participant was talking about, she had a weekly planner, which was good, of the staff supporting her, but it had lots of to be confirmed written on it, and she didn't like that at all. Don't like that. No, I don't like that. It upsets me. I always want to know who's working with me. I wish they'd sort it out. Seemed quite a reasonable request. Final thing was making time. So people were talking about not being too busy to be with them, and not doing things that took them away. Staff not doing things that took them away from clients when clients needed them. So this notion of being available, giving time, giving attention, specifically referred to. Some participants talked about staff being too busy. Other staff talked about actually being ignored and being made to wait. And again, some of the emotions this caused in clients, in some people sadness, and some people annoyance, and some people anger. So quite clear triggers of behaviours of concern. So good staff, this is about, they spend time with me, they talk to me, they make time, they talk about things. On the other hand, that irritates me when they keep me waiting and waiting and waiting. Another conversation here. So what do staff do that upsets you? When they're busy. How does that make you feel? Angry. I'm not patient. I want to go out. I want to go out. I keep on saying that. What do they say? Wait till they've done the planning at the weekend, and then someone will take you out. I'm not patient. I get annoyed when they don't listen. What was sad here was the participant seemed to be using a label given to her, you know, you're not patient, and she seemed to be repeating that back. Okay, quite a long quote. They don't listen to me. They don't listen to what I tell them. They don't listen when I ask them nicely. They're all busy. It's upsetting when they don't listen to me. They say they're busy all the time. They never talk to me when they're busy. They shut the office door. They don't take any notice of me. They shut me out of the office, and they don't listen to me. They say, go to your flat. Don't talk to me because I'm busy. And they ignore me all the time. They do take no notice of me. They go in the office and shut the door and have meetings. Stay in your flat and don't shout and don't bang either. They tell me off when I shout. I don't like being ignored. So, I guess some points to consider. People had significant experience. They weren't necessarily describing their current service. I think it's fair to say some participants were talking about their current service, whether they're good or less good support. But we decided that we wanted to be transparent about supporting our services and to celebrate the great support, but also say, in some areas, back then when we did this research, some of the behaviour of staff wasn't perhaps what we would want it to be. However, it's important to remember that a lot of the behaviour they were describing was historical experience. I think I mentioned before, what good support is, it can be described by saying they should do this, but as well as they shouldn't do this. So both were useful in terms of understanding good ways of staff behaving. What was interesting, which may seem a little controversial, but actually none of the participants referred specifically to some of the areas of good support that traditionally have been covered in the literature. So active support. There was people did talk about help me, and they did talk about don't ignore me, but it was interesting. I mean, that may be because people hadn't experienced those kinds of good quality support, or it may be that they had experienced it but hadn't recognised it as such, or it may be that other relationship factors were more important. So community participation, not many people, well, nobody really said good staff take me out, good staff enable me to access the community. But I guess some people did say poor staffing arrangements means that I get kept waiting to go out. But it was interesting that wasn't what they particularly focused on. It seemed to be other relationship factors that seemed to be more important. What was particularly useful, I think, was participants who referred explicitly to what staff should or shouldn't do when they were distressed, in behavioural distress, when there were behaviours of concern. Obviously incredibly useful in terms of staff understanding how they should behave. The participants were really clear that actually, yes, it is stuff that staff do at times that contributes to these behaviours of concern. They were explicitly clear about that. Might make them feel, sometimes them feeling undervalued, of less worth. And if we're focusing about improving quality of life and people's sense of well-being, things that staff do that makes that less likely clearly aren't things we'd want to be happening. Some of the behaviours, staff behaviours, so telling me what to do, this notion of power imbalance, that somehow staff were able to do that, they had the authority in some way to do that. And in, as I said earlier, I mean, some of the participants, they seemed wearily to accept this, but others it definitely made them cross, angry. They've got no right to do this. Why are they telling me to do this? Why are they telling me to do this? Yeah, participants really clear that this is not staff members' role. Equally, it's not their role to rush people or nag people. So, what we wanted to do was look at the specific staff behaviours that people with learning disabilities, behaviours of concern, what behaviours are valued, so what are going to create better rapport, better relationships, better support, better quality of life. That's what we were really looking for in this. And I think we got quite a lot of that, to be fair. People were able to define, the participants were able to define these behaviours quite clearly, which is helpful in terms of staff development and defining the role of good support worker. So, I think these findings could inform staff training content, so I think it's important to include the feelings of people with learning disabilities in staff training. We've certainly found that when staff experience what it's like from the person with learning disabilities point of view to be supported and how that can contribute to their more challenging behaviour, that's had a big impact on how staff behave and how staff think and feel about their role in most cases. Also, I think using some of these characteristics in terms of recruitment and saying these are characteristics that are valued by our clients, so we need to promote these staff behaviours, these qualities, and people with these qualities need to be promoted, I guess, as well. Also, in terms of providing better matches between individual clients and staff members, so a staff member with particular skills in a particular area, in terms of rapport with a particular client, that rapport can be enhanced, the relationship can be improved. And as I've said, I mean, the whole point of this in the first place was to try to improve people with learning disabilities' quality of life because of the significant role that staff members often play in people's lives. They spend an awful lot of time with staff members. But also, if we make better use of what we found, I think that also have an impact on staff stress, injury turnover, because we'll be preventing behaviours of concern happening in the first place, because we're using relationship and rapport factors as part of primary prevention. So if we get that right in the first place, then that will have an effect. So in conclusion, listening to the views of people is important. It's the right thing to do. It empowers them, but it also gives us an opportunity to hear their views. And it definitely can have a positive impact on service delivery, and it should have a positive impact on service delivery. We need to be, certainly in the organisation involved in the study, we needed to make sure that having heard the views of those clients, that was used to improve the quality of their service. I think this study could help contribute to evolving the understanding of the role of the support workers. So, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of views from a lot of very, very wise and experienced people around what a good support worker should look like, should behave like. But I think hearing the views of people with learning disabilities is incredibly important. So I think getting this match better, pointing out specifically the behaviours in staff that are valued, that are going to lead to better rapport, that are going to lead to better relationships, better ability to teach skills, clients feeling greater sense of well-being, greater sense of being valued as a person, being treated well, is definitely going to have an impact on intensity and frequency of behaviour, but also on staff experiences as well. So getting that match seems to be important. Okay, I guess now's the time for questions. So we've got some questions here already. So question here around interviewing parents. I mean, we didn't interview parents. This is from Gina. We didn't interview parents in this study. I mean, obviously, a larger study that interviewed the views of interviewed a whole range of people. So various professionals, frontline professionals, senior professionals, academics, parents would be a great study. But this study, no, this study was just specifically people with learning disabilities. And I guess, as I say, the pragmatic notion that people with learning disabilities who could contribute verbally because of the limitations on time. Okay, there's a question here from Elaine. Okay, so this question is how to explain to an individual who does not like to be left alone, but is not one-to-one support, that you have to assist others. Some of the participants were able to explain that they understood that at times. They were critical of when they either weren't given an explanation or when the explanation was, you have to wait because I'm busy. I guess part of anybody's multi-elements plan would be to teach people ways of coping with situations they found difficult. So if you're not able to go out at this point in time for the reasons that you're giving, I guess the skill the person needs to learn is to understand that, to be given a respectful reason why that's the case, but I guess also to be looking at, are the person's hours in the right place? That's all going to help in a better plan, I would have thought. There's a question here from Steve. How did your research Okay, so this question says, hi, did your research find that tone of voice could impact on how the perception of what was said by people receiving support, and did you find that the boundaries of the relationship between staff and people receiving support were significant? I'm particularly interested in whether staff are perceived as being friends as opposed to a person paid to provide a service. Okay, definitely tone of voice was referred to. There was a quote I think I used where the participant was absolutely able to demonstrate different tone of voice, so absolutely made a big difference. In terms of friendship, no, people talked about friendliness. A couple of people used the word friendliness. People definitely didn't say they should be friends. Most people didn't use friendliness or friendly, but referred to friendliness in other ways. I didn't get a sense that there was a difficulty with boundaries, to be honest. I think people did understand that these people were staff, but they wanted them to be friendly staff. So I didn't get a sense of there being a difference there. And I guess being overly concerned that somebody might think of you as your friend, and then that leading you to speak in a slightly less friendly way would maybe be a concern that isn't necessary. People wanted staff members who, they were quite clear they were staff, they wanted them to be warm and kind and friendly. But no, I don't think there was a difficulty around boundaries. Okay, there's a question here about link to the study. There'll be a link to the study on the Bild website, and all the references to the paper will be there as well. The paper that I've referred to, I'm just being reminded, is in the most recent edition of the International Journal of PBS. The title is the same as this webinar, and it's my name, obviously. Question here. There's a question here. Could you say any more about how people prefer their behaviours of concern to be described or not described? Well, that's interesting. I mean, if you listen to what people said, I mean, they used phrases like kicking off, and obviously we wouldn't use phrases like that at all. Nobody said my behaviours of concern, so that would be an interesting question for future study, definitely. The question here from Janet. I'm curious about the fashionable use of the unhelpful phrase behaviour that challenges to replace challenging behaviour, and would be interested in your view and how this is linguistically supposed to be more person first. That's a massive question. I mean, there's so much debate. I think the point is it's about separating the person from the behaviour, isn't it? The phrase challenging behaviours was intended to mean one thing when it was first coined, and it's taken on all sorts of different meanings, and sometimes it's still used appropriately and sometimes it's not used appropriately. So I think there's various different ways of describing those behaviours. I think just to get away from this notion of challenging behaviour is some kind of diagnosis. You know, this person has challenging behaviour. Well, that's a misuse of the phrase. So I guess the different phrases are just to try to get away from that. What else? What's that one? Oh, okay. 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 Got another question here. How do we get staff to walk in the shoes of the people they support? Okay, well, I think we've certainly found that by helping staff members to understand how their behaviour affects the client they're supporting, we've seen that have a real positive impact on staff behaviour and how staff think and feel about their jobs. So, I mean, I'm certainly reading direct quotes, hearing direct quotes from people with learning disabilities about staff support. I think helps staff to empathise, definitely. Isn't it, okay, another question here. Isn't it time we looked at staff wages for support staff and to make people who work in this area feel valued in the crucial job? I do absolutely 100% agree. definitely. I mean, there's all sorts of arguments as to why people go into this work in the first place, and but I'm not going to get into that debate. But yeah, completely agree. It's an incredibly important job. Okay. There's a question here. Did you provide emotional support? As some of the stuff you have talked about has been quite emotional. Emotional support for people with learning disabilities and staff. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the interviews, being very aware of the emotional impact of the interview itself on the participants was incredibly important. Making sure they were fine, they were okay at the end of the process was incredibly important. And people were, but I guess any distress was prevented by gauging during the interview at what point to step back from a particular area. In terms of emotional support for staff, some of the text here has been made into a film, a brief film, which is used as part of staff training, and it does provoke emotions in staff when that's shown. So the film is of obviously not participants to protect their anonymity, but actors reading their quotes, and on training courses where that film's used, that can have an emotional impact on staff, definitely. And the trainers, having used that, then need to spend some time making sure that people are okay, obviously, afterwards. I think the overall aim of this, though, was to, first of all, hear from people with learning disabilities about what mattered to them, and then help everyone else to hear what those people said, so that their voice around staff behaviours that they did find either helpful or not helpful was heard more widely, and that I think quite appropriately might have an emotional impact on some people.
That film available more generally?
We can make the film available more generally, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Maybe on the Bild website.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I think that's probably enough for me. I'm going to hand you back to Bild.
Okay, on behalf of Bild and the Centre for the Advancement of Positive Behaviour Support, I'd like to thank Tom for today's excellent webinar. Can I remind everyone that the slides for this presentation will shortly be available to download from the Bild website at the address given earlier. And which has just appeared on the screen, or you can click on the webinars advert on the front of the Bild website. A link to watch this webinar in full will also be available there later, and everyone who's registered for this webinar will be sent an email with a link enabling them to watch it again on demand later. The page address on your screen also gives information about the other webinars in the series, all of which you can now watch on demand using the links provided on that page. And that's it for the CAPBS 2016 webinar series. We'd like to thank all the academics and practitioners who've contributed to the webinars this year, and to those who've joined us online. That's you. Thanks as well to our sponsors, the Department of Health, NHS England and Skills for Care, for helping us to make this contribution to developing PBS practice. We are planning to have more webinars in 2017, sponsorship permitting, and everyone who's registered for a webinar this year will be mailed the details as soon as we can confirm them. But for now, thanks again to Tom Evans, and goodbye everyone.